The hallways were usually noisy. With so many staff members trying to get around, this was inevitable. A veritable cacophony of hustle and bustle, chatter and small talk. And yet, even on a day as important as this one, a single set of footsteps rang out above it all. They lacked any verbal accompaniment, and yet none was needed. To those who heard the sound, the rapid, frantic smacking of feet on a smooth polymer tile floor, the message was clear. Get out of my way. This is an emergency. And to Riddle or App, it absolutely was an emergency. As a matter of fact, it could hardly be worse. He had checked, once, twice, thrice, just to make sure, but there was no denying the commands that had been entered into the console, nor was there any escaping the conclusion they brought. This wasn't an accident. Nobody could possibly put in orders like that by mistake. Someone was trying to kill the diplomats. And worse yet, they had access to the controls for said diplomats' living quarters, meaning that either security had somehow been breached, or someone on the inside, someone Riddle or App knew, was a traitor. Either way, it wasn't subtle. There were easy ways to go about it, ways that could leave no clear trace, or at least room for doubt, but this was something different entirely. This was a message, a declaration of war. And so, as fast as his short, free-jointed legs could carry him, Riddle or App ran. Truth be told, the distance wasn't that far, only 40 meters or so, but under the circumstances, it may as well have been a light year. It certainly felt like it, at any rate. Knowing that time was limited made the whole process seem to stretch on forever, at least until it ended. Frantically punching in the code, Riddle or App practically dove through the door as it opened, mustering every last bit of breath he could to yell a single word. Stop! At the sound of this sudden intrusion, everyone else in the room abruptly stopped and turned to face him. There was a beat, a moment of silence broken only by the sound of frantic, ratcheting breaths, until someone finally spoke. What's wrong? Still recovering from the run, Riddle or App sputtered out a reply. The ambassadors. Someone trying to kill the ambassadors. The room seemed taken aback by this claim. Some began speaking in shocked, hushed whispers to each other, while others simply seemed confused. What are you talking about? What's going on? The living quarters. Environment. Settings. Easy now, catch your breath. Gradually slowing down his breathing, Riddle or App spoke again, much more calmly this time. Someone changed the environment settings for the diplomats' living quarters. They're trying to kill them. Huh? I just checked a bit ago and everything was within the specified parameters. Well, someone must have changed it more recently then. See for yourself. Deciding to do just that, Victor Errant turned and walked over to a monitor, then pushed a few keys. He studied the screen for a moment, then turned back to Riddle or App. Everything still looks the same. Are you sure you didn't misread the settings? I checked 3 times, I know what I saw. Maybe they changed it back now that they know they've been found out, or maybe they tampered with the main monitors so they wouldn't display the correct info. But I know for a fact that those settings were tampered with. It was too obvious to be a mistake. What exactly did they change? Temperature? Pressure? Composition? Composition. Atmospheric gases. They're trying to poison the ambassador's air, and they're not being subtle about it either. It's 25% oxygen. For a moment, there was silence. Then, at once, the room erupted into raucous laughter. It had been a long day. Or at least going by the clock on Sam's personal communicator, a long 7 hours, apparently. Still, between the initial excitement, the deluge of questions from all parties involved, and the considerable amount of back-end setup work that needed to be done, he'd hardly gotten a chance to take a breath. So needless to say, he was hoping to just head back to his quarters, take off his suit and get some rest. He wasn't terribly pleased then, when he once again heard the distinctive tinny tones of a voice translated from a language no human being could even pronounce the name of, coming through his suit speakers. Excuse me, do you have a moment? Sighing into his suit, Sam turned to face the sound source, with the best smile his tired face could manage. Sure, what do you need? He spoke to thin air, before remembering who he was talking to, and looking down. They were, if Sam was being honest, pretty odd-looking. He wouldn't go so far as to call them ugly, a line which, in private, plenty of his crewmates were perfectly willing to cross. But they certainly didn't look like anything he'd ever seen before. Sure, he knew that he looked just as odd to them, but... well, they walked on 2 legs, and that's about where the similarities ended. With mottled brown-grey skin, short squat bodies with no discernible neck, and 4 of what could charitably be called arms coming out the top of their head, Sam couldn't help but feel like weirdness was a bit more than relative in their new neighbours' cases. Well, I was speaking with one of your crewmates earlier, and they referred me to you on the grounds that you were more knowledgeable on the matter. Probably Jenkins, thought Sam. He would throw me onto the bus like that. And I'm sorry if this comes off as insensitive in some way, but I'm just terribly concerned as a matter of safety and, look, with all due respect, if you've got a question, just ask it. The shorter of the 2 paused for a moment, performing an action that Sam assumed was his own equivalent of a deep breath before speaking again. Do you really breathe oxygen? A solid couple of seconds passed before another sound was uttered. When the silence finally broke, it was with a short, simple chuckle from Sam. Yes, we do. As in, just oxygen? Like, not an oxygenated organic compound or a stable oxide or anything like that? Just pure molecular oxygen? I mean, we don't usually breathe 100% oxygen. It's usually only about 20 or 25% of the total gas composition. But yeah, that's the part we use. How? What do you mean, how? I mean, I could explain how it's used in energy production if you want. It's pretty complicated, but the general gist is that O2 and hydrocarbons go in, a whole bunch of reactions happen, and carbon dioxide and water come out. That's a part of it, but I'm terribly sorry. But I just can't quite comprehend this. You really legitimately breathe diatomic oxygen? The unstable diradical that reacts with nearly every compound known to exist in nature? Sam paused a moment, furrowing his brow in confusion, before coming to a realization and continuing. Oh, yeah, it does have some diradical species, right? I almost forgot about the whole singlet-triplet deal, and will sometimes represent it as a diradical for the sake of writing reaction mechanics, but for all practical purposes, it's pretty much just a double-bonded molecule, not a diradical. So you're saying that humans perceive the 2 radical electrons as being part of a bond, not just 2 radical electrons? Yeah, that's the way it is. The bond's pretty weak, but it's there. Fascinating. I suppose it only makes sense that you consider it a bond, if that's the nature of your own planet's atmosphere. If that's what you're working with, I suppose your standards of what constitutes a bond would naturally be different, but even still. Hey, that goes for both of us. I never realized that you saw oxygen as such a big deal. Out of curiosity, do you know the origin of your own word for oxygen? It's been a while, but last I recall, I'm pretty sure it's something like acid creator. This was back in the early days of chemistry, so they thought that oxygen was what made acids acids. We know better now, but the name stuck anyway. Sort of like how hydrogen means water creator, when people first discovered it. They named it after the fact that burning it in air makes water. Interesting. We had known about oxygen's existence for a while, but as far as actually isolating and characterizing it, A sound came through Sam's suit speakers that, from his assessment, could either be some sort of static, or the actual word that his counterpart was speaking. Word for oxygen roughly means chaos poison. For quite some time, it was nearly impossible to synthesize it on the large scale, not that anyone wanted to, given how reactive even small amounts of it could be. Even now, it's hardly ever used in research, and even more so in industry. It's a specialty material, and ever since the, again, another static-ish sound, incident, it's been tightly controlled. I mean, I can kinda get that. We treat pure oxygen as a pretty serious fire hazard, especially since it's usually shipped under pressure, but even that's pretty common. Common? What use could you possibly have for pure oxygen at all, never mind under pressure? Oh, all sorts of things. It's used in welding, medicine, usually to treat people who can't take in oxygen properly, just by upping the concentration until they can get enough in to function. Rocket fuel, stuff like that. Hell, most industries use liquid oxygen whenever it's needed on the large scale. It's just more efficient to store and ship it that way. I'm sorry, I'm going to need a moment to process what you just said, because almost everything you listed was more utterly insane than the last. Welding? Storage efficiency? Medicine? Wait, what was that bit about rocketry? Oh, yeah, that. Back in the early days of space travel, a lot of rockets used liquid oxygen and hydrogen as a fuel mix. It was a good balance of feasibility and energy density back in the day. It still holds up decently well today, and some smaller launch programs use it, but we've got some more energy-dense mixes nowadays. Hang on, space travel? As in, you actually had people riding in rockets propelled by burning liquid oxygen and hydrogen. Yep. And before you ask, yes, they could blow up. And they did, a couple times. But by and large, they were pretty well handled when it came to safety. It was a risk people were willing to accept. Forgive me for saying this, but is your entire species this insane? Actually, wait a moment. You said that you now use more energy-dense fuels than liquid oxygen and hydrogen? Still chuckling to himself about the insanity remark, Sam replied, yes, I did. What on, garbage noise, could possibly be more energy-dense than that without exploding the moment it was mixed? Sam slowly turned his gaze upward, as if in contemplation. As he turned and locked eyes with his counterpart, visions of UDMH, NTO, LO3, HTP, CLF3, and all manner of other cryogenic, hypergolic, and generally absurd fuels and oxidizers danced in his mind, and his lips slowly curled into what even Riddle or App could recognize as a malicious smile. Oh, you are really not gonna like this.